development with a wealth of experience in building innovative and efficient mobile apps. So he has his experience designing and developing user-friendly and fully functional applications for Android and iOS platforms. And then he also has experiences in leadership as a co-organizer for Flutter Africa and ex-co-lead for Facebook Meta Developers Circle Accra. So you know that he's a hot kick. So today all your questions are going to be answered. Yes. So before we begin, I would like to remind you that we'll have a question and answering session at the end. So please feel free to ask questions. Let's get this started. Bright, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
All right, okay. Is it laudable enough?
Yes, it is.
All right. Okay, my name is Bright, as I was introduced. Let me share my note. Yeah, so my name is Bright. I'm a software engineer and currently I'm focused on mobile app development with Flutter. In my current role, I work more as a platform engineer where I develop plugins and write like native code that interacts with hardware for Android and iOS, and then also write the bridge for Flutter. So yeah. Yeah. I also work with Achieve, so I don't know if any of you know Achieve. Achieve is a savings and investment app, and I was actually the one, or one of the engineers that worked on that app. So today we'll be looking at building your first app in Flutter. With this particular session, I'm going to assume you already have Flutter installed because I'm not sure I want to take you through the process of installing Flutter since there are about 3 different platforms and that will be a little time consuming. If in any case, you haven't installed Flutter and you want to know how to install Flutter, just head over to flutter.dev, go to get started and choose the platform that you're using. So if you're using Windows, you select Windows. If MacBook, you select Mac OS, Linux or Chrome OS. So whichever one that you are comfortable with, you select it. And for Windows, it will probably ask you which platform you want to target. If it's Android or web or desktop, you should select it. Probably you want to select Android, and it will take you through the process of downloading all the tools that you need to download. So downloading Git, downloading Android Studio, or VS Code if that's what you are comfortable with, downloading the various extensions that you need, and then downloading the Flutter SDK itself, then configuring that SDK with your environment, right? And then running Flutter Doctor to confirm if everything works, right? Yeah, so for the other environment, you can follow the same step. If this is confusing for you, there are lots of YouTube tutorials that you can just follow and they will actually help you with the installation. If in the course of my session there's a question, you can always ask. If once I say it, I'll answer it. But if it's something that I can I can answer at the end of the session. I will do that. But once you have a question, just ask. I want it to be interactive enough. So yeah. And also, if there's something you don't understand, just bring my attention to it. All right. So these are some open source projects that I have worked on. Most of them are on my GitHub and GitLab pages. So you can find the source code there if you want to check out the code. One way of learning how to code or learning a particular framework or language is by reading other people's code. So if you want to do that, you can always go into it. So now, what is Flutter? Right. I'm sure before anyone will probably decide whether to learn Flutter, you may have decided, okay, you may have looked at other mobile frameworks. So something like React Native, probably Ionic, or the native ones, which is Jetpack Compose or Kotlin multi-platform and Swift UI, Flutter. You probably you've checked all this out, and um, you may have decided, okay, let me go with Flutter, right? Now, the big question is, I mean, what is actually Flutter? So Flutter is a Google UI toolkit. Um, what this particular statement means is Flutter isn't just a framework, right? It is a UI toolkit, which means that irrespective of the language that they implement Flutter with, we will still get what we are currently using. There's this particular video on YouTube where the Flutter team described how they created the whole Flutter framework, right? According to them, they actually tried Flutter with a lot of other languages, right? They tried with JavaScript, they tried with is it Scala? Yeah, they tried with Scala and some other languages, but they realized that they were not getting what they actually wanted. And when they tried it with a that language, they realized that okay, I mean that could actually solve their problem since the that language was created to replace JavaScript on the web, right? So Flutter is a UI toolkit is used to create beautifully compiled mobile applications and web and desktop from a single code base. Uh, yeah. So this is a simple and an outdated image of the Flutter framework. Now, this is in two parts. We have on the top level, we have the framework, and at the bottom, we have the engine. Currently, we are no more using the Scare engine, which is this over here, right? We are now using the Impeller engine, and Impeller uses the. I mean, Impeller is more or less created from scratch by the Flutter or the Dart team because they had some issues with the Scare engine. On iOS, it was buggy. On Android, it was causing a whole lot of issues. So they had to basically rewrite their own engine, right? So at the bottom of everything, there's the engine. So this engine is basically what is responsible for your mobile app or your web app basically running. And on top of this engine, then we have the framework. So the framework is what makes Flutter Flutter. So in the framework, we have the two designs, so material design and Cupertino design, right? So material design is for Android, which follows the material design specifications, and Cupertino is for iOS. There are some other third-party ones like the fluid design, which is for I think Windows, and then we have one also for Linux, which I've forgotten the name, right? So Yeah, but these are all like third party that was created. Then just under this, we have widgets. There's a common sentiment in Flutter that everything is a widget. I mean, this is why that is said, because at the end of the day, everything that you see, a button, a text, an image, and whatever, right? It is basically a widget. So the widget is being rendered by either in a material manner or a Cupertino manner. So yeah. Then under these widgets, we have the renderer. So this basically renders what you draw on the canvas. So if you type in a text button or an elevated button, right? That has to be rendered, and this guy here is responsible for rendering that. And then just under this, we have uh, three blocks. We have animation, we have painting, and we have gesture. So gesture is your on tap, on swipe, on press, on long press, like all those events. Then we have the painting. So the painting is you. So here's the thing about Flutter. So Flutter is like a canvas, right? A white canvas. Whatever you draw on the canvas is what it will display. That's why on Flutter, you own every pixel of the screen. So the screen is basically the canvas that you are drawing the UI on. And so you have the ability to even create your own custom widget or your custom components, if you want to call it that. And just beside it, we have animation. So you can also actually draw up any animation you want. You know, animation is very close related to physics and mathematics. So if you are very good in that aspect, you can actually create any complex animation that you want easily because you have access to that at a framework level. Then under this, we have the foundation. So the foundation is basically a common service that is, or a common layer that is available to all the aspects, like I/O, so input output. We have other services like, let me see, yeah, like I mean, calling something. If you want to access the I/O, the basic input output of Flutter, right? You can find it in the foundation because it is not dependent on any particular design specifications. Like if you want to call something like um, the haptic feedback. So when you click on something, you want to feel a vibration. When you click on a button, you want to feel a vibration, right? That particular like service is already baked in the foundation because um, you can use that in Android, you can use that in iOS, you can use that in macOS or like any other service. So it is something that is like very fundamental. So you can find that in the foundation itself. In the engine, as I said, now we have impeller here, and then we have the DAT. So that's as the language that is used to power the framework. You can find it here. Then you have text. So rendering all your text, passing it, and everything is being handled by the engine. The crazy thing about Flutter is when you are running Flutter in debug mode, Flutter actually adds a copy of the engine to your APK. That is why when you look at the APK or the IPA of your app on your iOS simulator or your iPhone or the APK on your Android, it is very huge because it adds a copy of the engine also into the app. That helps you perform what we call auto reload. We'll be looking at auto reload later when we are actually delving into the code. But that particular um, technique helps you achieve auto reload because now the engine is no more on your PC, but the engine is also on the phone with the code. So it's able to easily re-render everything that it needs to. So what platform does Flutter support? We have mobile, which is Android and iOS. Then we have web. We have desktop for Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and Chrome OS also. Then we have embedded systems. So your Raspberry Pi, Orange Pi, and all the other embedded systems that you have. There's also an extended, should I say, support for watch. So if you are, let me just say wearable. So if you have a watch and you want to also run Flutter on it, it's very much possible. Now, what is that? I mean, Flutter is just the framework, but the language that powers Flutter is the Dart language. And the Dart language is part of what we call the C family language, where this category of languages take inspiration from the C language. If you've ever written any C code, C++, any Java, C Sharp, Objective-C, again, maybe a Go, writing Go or something, you realize that they all have a very similar way of doing things, right? They all have the main method. They basically like they all do things like in the same manner. This is because all these languages they took their inspiration from the C language itself, right? So that is also one of them. That is why when you're coming from the JavaScript background or the Java background or the Kotlin background and Swift or Objective-C or even C Sharp, you can easily learn that language because it looks so much like the language that you are probably coming from. So that is a client optimized language for building fast apps on any platform, right? And I can also say that is an object-oriented class-defined language that's using the C style syntax, and it can also transcompile to JavaScript. That this is what helps it to run on the web. Currently, it can also compile to WASM, that is WebAssembly. So bringing the power of, let me say, C++ to the web, right? Yeah, it supports interfaces, mixing, and abstract classes, and all of that. Personally, I always advise people when you want to go into Flutter, you should probably do some Dart language. So you should probably try and learn the Dart language because this will give you knowledge or fundamental knowledge on what Flutter is. Like when you see const somewhere, you actually understand what that means in Flutter because const in Flutter means something different in from JavaScript, right? So yeah. Then if you want to learn that, see, no, not yet. You can easily go to that.dev. So this is the official website for the Dart language. You can go to docs, then you go to Tor, language Tor. And over here, I mean, so this is basically the table of contents. As you can see, it's not that many. If you dedicate a full day or a day or two, you should be able to basically go through all this, right? And basically you can just use this to learn the Dart language. I mean, it's fairly easy. If you're coming from, again, the object-oriented language background, some of these things are very similar to what you may have already done. So moving forward, why use Flutter, right? So one thing about the Flutter framework is it's fast development, or let me say, developer experience, right? Now, me personally, I started Flutter because of an issue that we had at work. So this is like the first company that I worked with when I was in the university, I think level 300, we developed a courier service app, and um, I worked on the rider side, and it was in native Android. And we used about 8 months for this project. After we launched the project, we expanded our fleet to include saloon cars. So saloon cars, trucks, and uh, some other vehicles. I think the tricycle, right? Now, the saloon cars that were coming, some of these drivers were using iPhones, which means that they couldn't get on the Android. And I mean, I was basically faced with the issue where, and the client app, which is the one that the users use, was created with Ionic. So I was in that dilemma if I have to rewrite the app into Ionic, or I have to use React Native, because as at 2018, React Native, 2017, 18, React Native was like very hot. I mean, it was like the top leading mobile like cross app framework out there. So yeah, I mean, I was faced with that issue, or I have to learn native iOS. So I think that was when Swift UI also came out. So I had to learn Swift and Swift UI. Then basically I have to maintain two mobile applications. So I was in that dilemma. I think that was when, based on my research, and I bumped into Flutter, an ad on Flutter. So, and it was from Google, and I very much like Google. So I was like, let me try this. But I didn't understand the whole thing because there was no, I mean, I came from the Android background, and I was expecting some UI drag and drop, right? And there was none. I mean, I started hearing something of what declarative UI, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I mean, what is all this? I tried it the first time. I didn't understand what was even going on. So I just stopped, and I proceeded to research more on Flutter. And I found a tutorial on YouTube by Pawan. Pawan is, I think, part of the first GDEs in the whole world. I mean, as at 2018, he was the only one that was having a tutorial on Flutter on the entire YouTube. So I followed this tutorial, and I was able to learn it. Now, during this period, I was also rewriting the app in that process and calculating everything. I rewrote the entire app. So the 8 month app, right, in 6 weeks, that was running on Android and iOS, right, using Flutter. So Flutter gives you that ability to move very fast, because instead of you writing your UI, now writing your logic, your Java logic, and connecting these two together, I mean, you get to just do it the declarative way. You create your UI, and your UI is basically your code, right? You can add the logic also in there, and then you have something like hot reload that when you develop a feature, you don't have to restart the app to see what you've done. As you are writing the code, you're actually seeing the effect of what the code you are writing on the device, right? So fast development, expressive UI, you can actually customize the UI as how you want. As I said, Flutter gives you the ability to own every pixel of your screen. Um, and currently, Flutter is the only framework that gives you a near or a very close native performance experience, right? Although it is a cross platform, it gives you the performance of like a native app. Then again, there's hot reload that as you're writing your code, you're seeing the effect of your code on the device in near real time. So you're able to basically, it's like when you type a text in your code, you see a text on the screen, right? And then you have high performance, so you can write like complex animations, and you don't have to be so worried about your app consuming so much memory. Because for something like iOS, if your app is using too much memory, the iOS operating system will basically kill it, right? It will just shut down your app. And when your app consumes memory for 2 or 3 times in a row, then your phone will mark that app as a problematic app. And the next time you probably try to push an update, Apple will reject it, right? And then we have the Flutter API very being consistent. This point is a little dicey because over the years, I mean, I started with Flutter when it was very, very young. And I've seen the growth and the changes and the breaking changes that they introduced throughout this period, right? I think about like 7 years now. So some of the APIs had to change to accommodate the new industry standard or the new way of doing things. Some of them were maintained. So yeah, this point is particularly a little dicey. Well, one thing I'll say is migrating a very old code base that was created with let's say with Flutter 2.0 to using Flutter 3. I think 19, right? It's fairly easy because there are tools in place that helps you with that migration process, and not so much changes. Maybe some of the widgets have been deprecated. So yeah. Then we have a customizable UI kit. So customizable kit for widgets. So basically you can customize a widget how you want it. If a button is square or triangle and you want it to look like a star, you can do that, right? So yeah. Now, before we go into the code part, are there any questions, any clarification? I think you can ask.
Hello. Please, if you have any questions, you can just type it in the chat area.
All right. So we continue.
Okay, so right, I would like to ask a question.
Okay.
Hello. Yes.
Yeah, I can hear
So
you.
let's say okay, so let's say I'm a beginner and I don't know any language. Can I just
Mhm.
start with that and then become a Flutter developer?
Yes. So the good thing about the Dutch languages, because it closely relates with other languages, right? Um, when you learn the Dutch language and probably along your journey or in your career, you have to write some Java code or some Kotlin code, or you have to basically switch to backend, probably using C Sharp, just because from the things that you've learned in the Dutch language, which looks so very close related to all those other languages, you will be you will easily be able to um, learn like that new language because of, I mean, the thing that you learn already in that, because inheritance in that is the same inheritance in C Sharp, just that in that the name is not inheritance, but it's called mixing, right? So it's like
Oh,
it's the
okay.
same approach, but their names may have changed. So unlike learning a language like Python, right, and moving to a language like Java, you face a steep learning curve because a lot of the names have changed, and how those elements we also use are also so different. Let me say it that way. So it makes it like pretty much confusing because dictionary in Python is works differently from how dictionary in Java. So I mean it's a little confusing. But with something like the Dutch language, they made it in such a way that they took, let me say, they took the best features from all these languages and they brought it together. Let me say that. So yeah, I mean
Okay.
it's a good first timer language to learn.
Oh, I see. Thank you very much. I think we have a few questions in the chat area. So Edmond says the difference between Flutter Flow and Flutter.
All right, so when you say Flutter Flow, I'm guessing you're probably talking about this, right? Now, Flutter is a framework based on the Dart language. Flutter Flow is a low code or no code solution based on Flutter. So if you look at it, we have Flutter, then we have Flutter Flow on it. So if you're writing the normal Flutter, right, you basically write everything yourself. You write everything by code. Then you run it and you see what you've written. Flutter Flow, and here's the thing, Flutter doesn't have, let's say, UI drag and drop. It doesn't have it. I mean, that's not how it works because it is declarative, right? You declare what you want to see. That's how it works. Now, it's not everyone that is, should I say, good in that, like how to virtualize something and create it. Some people actually find it difficult. So something like, and also it's not everyone that can also code or write like code. Because of that, that's why this platform actually came up. Now, this platform is to help people who can't actually write code to be able to also create applications. So this uses the Flutter framework, but in this case, you can actually drag and drop elements or widgets or components to create your app. So instead of, let's say, typing in button or typing in text button, then providing it a child and say login, you can select on Flutter Flow, you can select on the UI, you can select an element that says button. You can drag it to the canvas or the UI that you have, and then you can just change the text there to login. Then you are done. Now this looks easier, or this looks easy compared to writing your actual code. But the thing here is, because this is a no code or low code solution, you are somehow limited to what you can actually do because they have provided you with the elements that you can use, right? Which means that when you have an element that is not currently available with what you have been provided, and you still don't know how to code, you will basically be stuck. I mean, either you have to invite another engineer to write that code for you and import it into your project, or you find a way, around it. So Flutter Flow gives you the ability to create Flutter apps using drag and drop. And Flutter gives the ability to create like your app by you writing your own code. I don't know if the difference is clear. And this is also paid. There's a free version of it, but if you want to perform some actions, you have to pay for it. But Flutter is open source, so you don't have to pay for anything. Probably maybe when you are trying to deploy your app, then that's when you have to pay for the developer accounts. I don't know if this explains it. All right. Okay. I guess there's no other question. Okay. Yeah, so someone's asking, can you write some code in Flutter Flow? Yes. So in Flutter Flow, you can, I think in the UI, I'm sure somewhere along the line they showed it. Yeah, so something like this, right? So you can actually write code in there. But again, if you don't know how to code at the first place, you probably not know what you are doing there, right? So you can still write your code in there, but again, to the level at which you can manipulate what you are doing or that code is very limited. And this even extends to if you are trying to work on a feature that heavily relies on native code, you may be found wanting because for native code, you have to probably go into the Android and the iOS folders and probably write some native code like yourself, or some native configurations here and there. So yeah, you can write code in Flutter Flow. All right. So continuing, um, this is what is it? This. So, hmm, okay. Yeah. So I'm basically talking between that one and this on what we should be building. Yeah. But I mean, I think we are meeting twice. So in any case, we will decide along the way. But to start everything, I would like to start from the Dart language. So we are going to quickly go through the Dart language itself. Then we move to Flutter. The reason why I'm doing this is because when I get to Flutter, when I write a function, when I say something like mixing, right? I don't want you to get confused because I want you to know what mixing is. Or when I say I'm creating an interface or I'm creating an abstract class, I want you to understand what those things mean, right? So using the documentation, you're not going to go through everything. You're just going to pick some of them and go through it. It is now your duty to take your time and go through this and learn it. And if you feel like you want to also advance in it, you can go ahead and read more, watch other tutorials, or read other articles on it, right? So I'll be using Datpad. So Datpad is an online editor that you can use for prototyping. I use it personally a lot. You need to write pure Dart code or Flutter, right? So when you go to new, you can either create like use it to easily preview your Flutter widget, or you can just write a pure Dart function in there. Yeah. Why is it taking time? All right. So when you run it, basically, or when you open it, this is what you see. You can go ahead and run it and can basically view the outputs. So there's it. So um, let me quickly explain this code before we move on. So in programming languages, there's this concept we call control statements, right? So there's this statement that helps you control the flow of the code. For example, if you are home, right, and someone's or you decide to send someone to buy you something, or someone is basically going to the market, and you're like, okay, I want you to buy me pineapple. And in this case, you know, probably we are not really in pineapple season, so then you may not have pineapple in the market, but that's what you want, right? So you told the person, say, buy me pineapple. But if you don't see any pineapple, you can buy me watermelon. Or if you don't see any watermelon, then just buy me orange, right? This is basically a pure control statement. And this probably use an if statement, what we call the if statement, right? So this control statement controls the flow. So we are saying that if they see a pineapple, they should buy it. So which means that if the person goes to the market and see the pineapple, you just go ahead and buy it. Then case closed, right? But if you don't see it, the next thing you mentioned was what? Watermelon. Then they go ahead and start looking around for watermelon. If they see that one also, they buy it, case closed. But if they don't, then you have to move to the last one you mentioned, which is the orange. So when they see orange, then they buy it. But in this case, if there's no orange also, then in that case, the person will just come back empty-handed. Okay, I haven't seen any of the things that you mentioned, right? So in this case, we are looking at so this is what's called a for loop. So a for loop basically keeps running until a condition is met, right? So what is this condition? We are saying that if I is basically a variable. We look at variable later, but we are saying if I is zero, so it's zero, and I is less than 10. So we are saying that the first value of I is zero. Now, if in any instance I is less than 10, so if I is 1, 2, or 3, or whatever, right? If it's less than 10, then add 1 to the value. So if it's 0, 0 is less than 10, right? So you add 1 to it, making it 1. That one is also less than 10. So you add another 1 to it, making it 2. That's what it means. That's why when you look on the right hand side, you have 1, 2, 3, up to 10. So it means that when you go to number 10, 10 is not less than 10. 10 is actually equal to. Therefore, this it can't continue executing, so it has to stop. That's right. It stopped on number 10. So that's what this code is basically doing. This print statement only means that you should output it in the console. Just like in Java, we have system.out.print, right? And in JavaScript, we have console.log and whatever. So in that, we have print. That is it. All right. So going back to our code, yeah. So introduction to the Dart language. So far, are there any questions? All right. So I assume there's no question. So one thing you will notice in any Dart file or also Flutter is there is this function called main, right? It's always extends to void. Now, main, if you've done Java before or C# or C or C++, right? Okay, so okay, someone has a question. Okay, all right. So let me answer these two questions before I continue. So let me answer the last one before the first one. So if you don't have any idea about coding, is it going to be difficult to use Flutter? Um, so here's the thing, right? Uh, Flutter, so think of it this way, right? Let's say it's in the form of um, a hierarchy. We have language, then we have framework, then you probably have your app, right? Which means that if you don't know a language, it will be very difficult for you to know the framework, because the framework is just tools, and helper classes that have been wrapped together to make it easier for you to use the language to build whatever that you want to build. So um, you probably have to know how to write code to use Flutter, because with something like Flutter, you will be writing code. You will be like putting code in your editor. Therefore, you have to know how to code. But the thing here is, it is a process, right? Just like how you're starting from learning the Dart language. That is how it usually starts. So you learn the language, then based on the knowledge or based on the basic idea you have of the language, you can proceed to the framework. So now when you go to the framework and you start seeing things that you learn in the language, you are not confused or scared, because those are things that you may have learned. And if there's any advanced concept that you have to know based on the framework, you can easily learn it, because now you have the basics already there. The basics of the language is very important. You have to know what int is, you have to know what string is, what boolean is, and all that. You have to know all those things at least before you can use any framework, not only Flutter, any framework, right? So for your question, if you don't have any idea about coding, is it going to be difficult? Um, Probably it will be difficult because you won't know what you're actually doing. So just take some few, as I said, you can go through this in a day or two, because they've simplified this document for first timers so that they can easily learn the language, right? There are also tutorials online that you can follow if you want a deeper understanding, right? And there are communities where you can also ask questions if there's something that is so confusing for you. Now, to the third question, just to clarify, if someone is familiar with C language, is it easier to learn that? Yes. I mean, if you learn C language, you probably be familiar with this main, right? C uses it a lot because the main is the entry point of your application. Maybe var, you haven't seen it before, but you've seen int, you've seen double, you've seen boolean, you've seen classes, you've seen inheritance, and all those things, right? It is the same, should I say, knowledge. So basically, this is like a transfer of knowledge from what you know in the C language to what you are coming to learn in the Dart language, right? So as the definition said, it is what a C-styled language, which means that they styled it according to how the C language works or looks, right? So if you have knowledge in C, it's going to be very helpful to you because you easily identify some of the things that you already know in the C language. Now moving to the last question, or the first question in that case. I know Flutter tends to rely heavily on platform security. So if there is no patch on the platform, it mostly tends out to be vulnerable. So just for that statement, Now, every framework, let me see. Every framework relies on platform security. Native Android, Swift UI, React Native, Ionic, just name them. They all depend on the platform security. So if your device is compromised, it's very easy to compromise that application also, because the application is basically relying on the secureness of that platform to run successfully or efficiently, right? Now, for vulnerabilities, I mean, I don't think there's much if it's a platform vulnerability, I don't think there's much you as a developer you can do in your power. The only thing is probably maybe putting in measures to make sure that something like your tokens are not stolen. And that is no more a platform security, but more or less an app security that you have to perform as an engineer or a developer. I don't know whether you get me, right? So now the second statement, um, Flutter code documentation. Yes, I know there's one. I've forgotten the name. I will have to look for it. Let me see. Because I know that is what the Flutter team actually uses. I've forgotten the technical name. So, mm, I'm not going to find the name. But I'll look for the name, and probably in the next session I'll make it known to you. I've forgotten the name. Yeah, but I think if you go to the Flutter rep on GitHub and you look through there, they have a bunch of mark markup files, right? I think there's one that they mention uh, how they generate their documentation. There's one that they mentioned that in there. Um, the name of the tool they use should probably be in there, and that tool is already in the that SDK or in the Flutter SDK, so you don't have to worry so much. Yeah, but I'll have to get the name. I've forgotten the name. It's then then the last question is with layers, MVC, MVV, which one would I recommend? Okay, I mean, this is like a bunch of questions stuck together. All right. I don't think I can actually recommend any architecture you should be using, right? So this is one thing that is a little dicey in the Flutter community. Some people believe the Flutter team should create a folder structure, a pre-made architecture already baked into your Flutter app. So when you run Flutter create, right, the structure is already there, and you have to follow it, but you are forced to follow it. Some people also believe that it should be open, it should be fluid. You will choose what you want to do, right? So if you do that, something like Laravel, there's an architecture it uses, right? You can't change it, you can't go against it, right? Or basically, if you want to do that, you have to do a whole bunch of changes that you may not want to do. Some people want that, some people also want it open. Now, you as the developer, you have to decide which one works best for you and your organization and your team. So if you are like just two developers in the company, I don't think if you want to go in for something that is so complex, because again, you are just two in the team. But if you also sit down and look at the potential growth of your team, okay, maybe in some years to come, the team will probably be like 20 or 30 people. Then you should choose something that should be scalable enough or easy for you to scale in, or for you to even switch to other architecture if you want to, right? So I can't pinpoint like, okay, use this, use that. I mean, personally for me, I use multiple architecture for like different projects. For Achieve, we use the events approach where we have like everything is like an event running through the app. Then we combine it with the repository approach where repositories makes network call, and then we use dependency injectors to basically inject all those results back into the UI. That's what we do right now. So that's a completely different architecture from other projects I've worked on. I have a manager service approach where the service makes the network call, then it returns the result to the manager. The manager uses the model to convert it into classes or objects, and then the UI consumes that the manager. I also use the manager and repository. So again, there's no like you can choose what you want to do, right? So I don't think I can actually tell you the exact approach to use, but what you can do is read more on them, try as many as you can until you find the one that just clicks for you. That is it. Then state management again. I can't recommend a state management solution for you. Again, it is dependent on the project, the team size, right, and what you already know. Because there are lots of state management solutions out there. I may mention one that you've never used before. So it doesn't mean that you should probably go and learn it just to because I said so. Because there are lots. There's Mobex, there's Fish, there's Flags, there's Block, there's Provider, there's Riverport, there's Signal. I mean, it's just so much, right? So again, try as many as you can, and then you can basically choose the one that feels okay for you. Because at the end of the day, state management is just data management, how you manage your data. So it doesn't really depend so much on this the solution you are using, or what it depends on is the one that let me say how you actually manage that data. Because you can decide to go with Block because the said Block is very powerful, it's used by very big companies, but in your project it wouldn't work for you just because of how your project is. So you need to choose something that works for your project, and then something that can help you deliver also very fast, because you don't want to be um, stuck based on a state management solution that you pick. Like I don't know, I don't want to mention it, but yeah. So yeah, I know you want recommendations, but I honestly can't recommend. It is not in my place to recommend, but I can just guide you on how you can choose the one that works for you. Right. So I'm sorry if maybe this is not the answer you want to the question, but I can't recommend. I can only guide you on the one that you should choose, or how to choose the one that works for you. Yeah. And I hope that is correct. All right. So going back to the that code. So in as I said, in that the entry point of your application is called main, right? Which means that if you have a code, so if you have this code, right, and you remove this main, right, you won't be able to run this code. Or even if you have a function say do. So I mean, you have this nice function, right? You still won't be able to do anything with this. As you can see, it's not running because it's complained about. It can't find the main function. because the main function is the entry point of your application, which means that when your app is running, that is the first thing that is called, right, before any other thing. So that is the entry point of your application. So it's a high level function. You can't change the name. You can't edit the name. I mean, it's a how do you call it? How do you call that? It's a reserved word, so you can't also create another function and call it main. I mean, it doesn't work that way. You confuse the compiler, right? So main is a reserved word. It is the entry point of the application, and it is a top level function. So it's usually always left at the top of the file or the first line of the file that you have. Now, moving downwards, we have variables. So we can quickly go through the variables. Now, if in any case you don't want to state the type of variable that you're actually using, right? So let's say this, you don't know whether it's a string or it's an integer or it's a boolean, you can always use the var keyword. So the var keyword for variable is basically, let's say, a dynamic way of assigning a variable. Although it is not usually encouraged, but you should probably only do it if you are very sure that you don't know the type or you can determine the type of the variable that you want to use, right? So over here we have, so you can see this is a string, this is a number, but they're all being called var, and it will work and it makes sense that way. So for variables, you first, for a typical variable, you state the type. So currently we are using the var as the type, then the name that you want to give it. So if you want to call it Ama, Kofi, or whatever, right? You state it here. Then you can choose to equate it, or you can choose to assign a value to it. So over here for name, we are assigning this value to it. So going back to our code, so I can have a variable called name, and I can then type in my name, right? So this is basically me declaring a variable. We can print out the result by saying print name. Remember, the Dutch language uses semicolon, so you should always end your statement with a semicolon, right? It's better to find this. All right. So basically, this is a variable. You can also do var year, let's say 2025, and you can then print out. Yeah, so you can see it here. So basically, this is how to declare a variable. Now, moving on, we have the control flow statement. Now, I mentioned this when I was explaining the sample code, but I will go over it again. So the Dutch language supports the usual control flow statement. So if is basically more or less comparing or comparing a particular situation. So in this case, we are saying that if year is greater than or equal to 2001, then we want it to print 21st century. Else, if it is greater than or equal to 1901, then it should print 20th century. So basically, I mean, this is like a control. So I'm going to, let me use the same example. And yeah, so we already have year, right? We've declared year at the top here. So when I run this, let's see what it will say. So it's saying that in the first century, which means that this was what was executed. So it's picked this value and it's compared it with this. So we are saying that it should be what? Greater than or equal to. So it checked this value, is it greater than or equal to this value? If it is yes, so if it's true, then it went ahead and ran this. Then it stopped. That is it, right? So if let's say year is like 1900, right? Then it should probably say no, sorry, 1902. Then it probably say 20th century. You can also introduce an else, which means that if any of these two conditions hasn't been met, you should probably say century, right? So in this case, if this is the 1900s, it's told us that it cannot cause this 1900 is less than this, so automatically it doesn't satisfy this condition. It's also less than this, therefore it's just called the else. So this is just like the same example that I gave. So the pineapple, going to the market looking for pineapple, you don't see it. You check for watermelon, you don't see it. Then else is probably the orange that you are bringing back to the person. Now we have the for loop. So for loop is basically used to loop through an object or a list of objects. So there are different form of for loops, right? You can read more into them later, but I'll use just the example we have over here. So this two. So let me first this. Okay. So let me explain this code. So over here, we are basically checking, we are saying that for object, this object in this. So this, right, this flying object, we have to create it. So I'll probably create it as a list and say this is equal to, let's use fruits. So mango, apple. So I have this, and I hope you guys can see. I try to make it big. So yeah. So we have a list of fruits, right? Now I'm saying that I want to look through all of them. So I want to basically print each of the item in this array. So that's when I can use the for loop. So in any case, like let's say there's a list of objects and I want to look through it to find, let's say, a particular object or to manipulate a particular object, then I can use the for loop. So when I run this, as you can see, it prints out all the items individually, right? So basically, this is the in. So we are seeing that, I mean, it should basically look through it, look through this array. The other version of it is using this approach. Now you can actually choose to interchange them depending on what you are building or how you want to use them, right? So let's say I have okay, months. Okay, good. So for this, we want to print out months if it is less than 12. As you all know, we have only 12 months in a year. So over here, what it means, we are first saying that the first month is 1. Right? So by default, the value of months is 1. And what it does, it's first, so this is the assigned value, right? So this is like the variable that was assigned. This is the variable that was assigned. So now it will pick months and ask. So now moving to the next one. So is month less than or equal to 12? That's it, right? So it will check if this is true. So this will basically return a boolean, so true or false. So if this is true, if month is less than 12, then it should continue and add 1 to. So when you see plus plus, it means that you want to add 1 to the variable that is assigned. So in this case, we have 1 plus plus making it 2. It goes back to here. So now this becomes 2. Then again, 2 is less, so plus plus making it 3, so on and so forth. So that is how this works. So when I run this, it should print 1 to 12. As you can see, from 1 to 12. Then it will stop because once it is 12, it is now equal to 12. So the condition is still valid. But once it is 13, right? When it is 13, 13 is greater than 12. Therefore, this returns a false. And since it's returning a false, it doesn't execute the next command or the next statement, which is the plus plus. Right. So this is it for the for loop. There are more examples that you can look out for later. Now, another control statement we have here is called the while loop. So while loop is, let me see if I can find a good example. Okay, I mean, I can still use the market example. So let's say someone tells you, okay, I'm going to town, but I may pass by the market. So that is the thing, right? So the person may pass by the market or not, and you need something from the market. So you can probably tell them, okay, let's say while you're at the market, so which is that if the person has been able to get to the market, so while that person is at the market, the person should get you an orange. And in this case, you haven't provided options. You only provided one item. So when the person gets to the market, the person will only be looking for what? The orange. And I mean, that person will have to return with that orange because that's the only option you gave him or her. So the while loop is it's more or less it should perform an action until a condition is met. So using this example again, let me see if I can. Okay, so looking at this, right, over here we are saying that if year, so if year is less than 2016, then it should, so it should pick it should pick here. So if year is, let's say, 2000, right? So 2000 is less than 2016. Therefore, we are saying that it should pick year. So this is what's happening. It should pick here and do equal to year uh, plus 1. This is what this statement here means. So this is like a shortcut. This thing you see over here. So this is add and equate. So basically, it will add the values and then reassign it to year. So if year is 2000, it becomes 2001. Therefore, the new value of year becomes what? 2001. I don't know whether this is clear. I mean, this can be a little confusing, especially when they use this type of approach. But this is as add and assign value. So basically, you add the value, then you reassign it to the variable that you're adding it from, right? So when I run this, let me rather say 20, 2030. So I mean, we already have year declared at the top, right? Here. Wrong. That's 16, right? So we have year declared at the top. So when I run this, oh, sorry, we are not printing anything, so you can't see what is going on. So let me print out year. Wow. So you can see, so we have 2025. It's added 1 to it, right? Now making 2026. Now the new value of year is now 2026. Then it checked, is 2026 less than 2030? Yes, right? Then it comes back and add 1 to 2026, making it 2027. And it goes back again. It's 2027 less than this. So it will keep performing the action until the condition here is actually met. So when the value is now probably maybe equal to 2030 or greater than 2030, then it will stop because now the condition is no more fulfilled. Therefore, it cannot execute the code we have over here. Are there any questions so far? Control statements can be a little confusing, but probably it takes some time to get used to it. And yeah, so if you have any question, please ask whilst I continue. There are more that you have to learn about. So we have the break, continue, switch. So we have the switch and case statement and the asset. So this asset works usually for when you're writing a test, because this runs only in development and debug mode. It doesn't run in production or when the app is released. So yeah. So I mean, so this is basically an overview. This is like an introduction. If you want to read more, you have to go here. Where is it? Yeah, I think here. Then it will take you to the actual detailed example or definitions of each of them. So there are other ones. We have the break and all that. All right. So I should explain the dollar sign. Yeah. So there is something. Let me see. I'm coming. Let me just see if it is covered. Okay, no, it wasn't covered. So types. Problem. No. sorry, types. All right, so I'm just going to use this to explain something to you. So for string, right, there's something we call string interpolation. This string interpolation basically means that you want to inject another string or another object into the string. Now, let me explain that. So you have, let's say, a statement, which is a string. Now, you want to, and there's part of that statement is dynamic. For instance, you want to type, let's say, my name is, I am X years old, right? Name and age are dynamic. So maybe the user will have to provide those values before the statement can be completed, right? Now, in order for you to do that, you have to use the string interpolation approach where you inject the answer. So the answer the user gives you, you are injecting it into the string to complete the statement. And for you to do that, you have to use the dollar sign to let the compiler know that the variable attached to the dollar sign is supposed to be dynamically injected into the string, right? And this value can be of any, it can be a boolean, it can be a number, it can be a string, it can be anything, right? So this dollar sign is just indicating that I am injecting a value into the string. Now, this is if the value is only one. As you can see, this is just S. But there's some instances where you want to add, I think let me just write this code. Yeah, so there are some instances where, let's say for this, let's say you want to add something. So this is a number. And a number has other properties, right? So you can see if you want to know whether a number is an even number, an odd number, it's a infinite number, it's a negative number, and all that. You can actually do all those things. So these are like properties of a number. So if without this curly brackets, just the dollar sign, if you call, let's say, is even, let me run this so you see what will happen. As you can see, it is seen is even as a string. It is not seen as a property of, it's a property of here. The thing is as a string. So in order for us to be able to get a variable and its property, we introduce a curly bracket. So a dollar sign and a curly bracket. Then in this case, when I run this, it's even is seen as a property. So string interpolation is in two forms, just the dollar sign and then the dollar sign and the curly bracket. These two. This is, I think, similar in JavaScript where you use the backtick. You do this. Sorry, I don't know if you can see. Let me do it here. So you do this in JavaScript, and then you probably, I mean, you can do something like this and type in something like this, right? I mean, it is the same thing here, but just like in the Dutch language, you do this, and then you get rid of the extra brackets or whatever. And you don't have to use the backtick. You can just use a normal single quotes or double quotes. All right, so that's how we answered. Let's go back to the introduction. Now the next thing is functions. Now, functions are the, let me say, the building blocks of your app. Because at the end of the day, you write a lot of functions. And also in Flutter, um, the you basically use functions as let's say modular codes that you can use elsewhere. So if you have, let's say, login, right? So you have so if you have a function that is for login, right? So you have this. So this is basically a nice function that you have. Now with this, sorry, let me bring it outside this because it is complaining. All right, just down here. I don't know if you guys can see. Yeah, just down here. So we have a function called login. To write a function, you declare the name, and usually your function to the name should be able to communicate what that function is doing, right? So this is for login. So we have the function called login. Then it proceeds with a bracket and then a curly bracket. This is a typical function. By default, every function that you haven't assigned a type to or a return type to is void. It has a type void. Again, the Java, C Sharp, probably Kotlin and Co, you understand what this void means, right? So this is a function without any return type. So by default, it has a type void. And so probably inside your code, you do something like you want to return one, then it is no more void because this one is a number, which means that this void can be changed to has to be changed to an int because the return type has to match the return value. So if you are returning a string, this has to be a string. If you're returning a boolean, this has to be a boolean. Yeah, so quickly, someone asked a question with var data type. Doesn't it consume a lot of memory, especially? Okay, so yeah, so with a var type, right? So with the var type and also the dynamic. So there's a type also called dynamic, right? What happens is the compiler, although you have stated to be dynamic, like var, it's a variable, right? So you don't know the type. The compiler infers the type. So the compiler looks at the value that you assign to it. So if you assign 1 to it, right, at the end of the day, when this is being created in memory, it doesn't create it as a dynamic type. It creates it as an int type because it is able to determine the type from the assigned value. So if you assign this to a string like this, then it knows that the assigned type is what? A string. So it infers the type when you use var, the reason why it's not encouraged to using var in dynamic is it makes reading your code very difficult. And also, imagine, okay, I have to do something like this. I have one here. Then I have this. So this basically will give us a value of what? 3. Because at the end of the day, it will infer that, okay, this is a number, this is a number. And when you use the add operator between two numbers, I have to add them, I have to sum them up, right? Now, when I do something like this, remember now one of them is a number, the other one is a boolean. You can't add a number in a boolean. Even as you can see, there's an error being thrown. So even now, most of the text editors and the IDs, they are now smart enough to determine that, I mean, what you are trying to do is problematic and it's an error, and you shouldn't do that, right? So basically, I mean, it doesn't actually use so much memory. The only thing is it's giving the compiler extra work, which is it has to infer the type before it's proceed. That's the thing, because it can't deal with the var type, right? It needs to know the type to know how to assign the memory address and all that. So yeah, I mean, just usually it makes reading your code very difficult. That's the thing. So it's always advised not to use them. I mean, you can only use them if you have no choice. And yeah, so I think we're on function. So again, a function has a return type and then a return statement. Functions without return statements is void. Like their return type is usually void. Now, functions can also accept arguments, right? So when now we add in here, sorry, let me make this void and get rid of this, right? So when I add here, string email, so this becomes the argument, which means that this function is accepting a value of type string. And I'm saying that the variable name of that type is what? An email, which means that even if I do this login, when I do login, do like gibberish, well, I'm using the function before signing. So yeah, right. It's it's probably still work because again, um, all it knows is it is accepting a string, and once you pass in a string, yeah, once you pass in a string to it, I mean it is good to go. It doesn't care what's like the content of the string. That's why you have validation that you have to do by yourself. So you have to make sure that it is actually an email by checking if it's an at and dot sampling, all those things, right? So what we have here is called what's an argument. Now there are different types of arguments. I can use that to explain it quickly. Yeah. So we have what we call the the positional So the positional argument and the named argument. Yeah, the named argument. So this is an example of a positional argument, because if I also do this, let's say age, right? And somewhere in my code, let's say I have I'm just giving an example, and I do this. Look, so I do this, right? And I say um, I pass in the email, and I forget to pass in the age to throw an error, because it is expecting two items in the position. So it is accepted. It's expecting first a string, and the next one an integer. Now, when I pass in like an integer, now like it should be okay, because now it's both. Let me see, isn't abstract. This is not computer something else. You can look at it later. So basically, this has been fulfilled. But the problem here is when, let's say, in my code, I come in, say, 3, and then I now pass in the email, right? It will never allow this, because what this function knows is, or what the compiler knows is, this function login, the first position of the argument have to be a string, no matter what. So if I pass in an integer, although it is valid, it is wrong, because the first position is supposed to be what, an integer, and the second one is supposed to be, the first is supposed to be a string, and the second is supposed to be an integer. But I've switched them, right? So this type of parameter is called the positional parameter. So it is very mindful of the position of the parameters that you declare. Now the next one is the named parameter. So when I have something like uh, sign up, now I introduce a curly bracket. Then I then say required, let's see, email. I will explain this very soon. Required into stage. So this is an example of a named parameter. Now I am calling the parameter by its name. So if I want to use this parameter, this is how I'm probably going to use it. Say sign up, then I have to now call the name. Sorry, it's called email. Then I pass in the value. Then age. Then I pass in the value. Then I end my statement. So this means that I have to call the arguments. So the arguments that I'm passing to the parameter, I have to call it by its name, and this is its name, right? Now, I've introduced something new here called required. So required here means that I'm saying that you have to pass it, like you have to provide that value. If you don't provide that value, it should throw an error. But there can be some instances where you don't have to provide, like you don't want to provide a value, or it is optional. Let's say age is optional, right? Then in that case, you need to tell the compiler that this value is optional. You can choose to provide it or not. And to do that, yeah, we are introducing a new concept called what, nullable type. So we introduce a question mark. So question mark here means that age can be null, but you can choose not to pass in the value, or you can even choose to do something like this, and it will work. It makes sense, because we are saying that this value can be null at some point, or you can choose not to pass it at all, and it will still work, or to still recognize the function that you've created. So with named parameter, we have two tab type called the required and the optional. For position, we also have a similar thing, but I'm going to look at just the optional part. Right. So for positional, this one, if you want to tell the compiler that this guy here is optional, you don't do this. Even if you do this, you still have to provide it. You still have to over here, right? Let me go back to this. Over here, you still have to do something like this. Like because it is position based, you have to do something like that. Instead, you have to use the square brackets to let the compiler know that although this is a positional parameter, this position can be omitted if the value of this is not known. Then in that case, you can actually have something like this and it will work out or it will make sense. I don't know whether you guys have any questions so far or if there's any confusion so far. You can ask. Yeah. So I mean, these are basically like logics of your application. Like if you're writing the logic of your application, these are the things that you will use. But in my experience, I always advise people to go with the named parameter because it is easier to read. It makes your code very easy to read. When someone clicks sign up, they see email, they know that they have to provide an email. When they see age, they know that they have to provide age. That is why even if you look at the Flutter APIs, or if you look at something like the button, or if you type in text button or elevated button, right? You realize that you need to state child before you provide a widget. You need to state a style before you provide a style. You need to state elevation before you provide the elevation. So those are basically what's named parameter. All right. No question probably means no question probably means there's no everyone understands. Now, just for function, I'm going to talk about one last thing. Now, there's another shortcut to write a function or to show the return type of a function. Now, both these return types are void, right? If I have a function that it's a one-line function, right? So something like, so let's use, let me just create a new one. Let me say, reset password, right? And I'm passing in an email, right? And maybe, I mean, in my logic, I'm just doing some one line something, and at the end of the day, I'm returning probably a boolean. Like so, let's say a true or false. Maybe I've sent the user the email or not, right? Now, even with something like this, I mean, again, the compiler has to infer and determine the return type of this because I haven't stated it. So I can choose to manually write it down. And this, right? I mean, this is taking how many lines? 1, 2, 3. This is 3 lines. Although this is cool, this is okay, but sometimes you want to write very small code, right? You want to write very compact code that is not taking too many lines. So in that case, we convert this to using the fat arrow, right? So this, or this. So this is indicating that this function is returning this. So you can just write in there true. So instead of writing, let's say the return type is true and all that in this, you basically just introduce the shortcut arrow, the fat arrow, and then bring the value that you are returning. So instead of having 3 lines, we have only 1 line. So that is also one way of writing function. Now, moving forward, we have comments. Wow, I think I have like an hour more. Well, we are looking at comments, right? Now, comments are basically used to communicate to, let's say, the developer itself. The compiler doesn't usually understand your comments. The compiler doesn't execute your comments. So it's usually for you, the developer, or the next person that will inherit your code base. So you write a single line comment using the double slash. You write a documentation comment using the triple slash. And you can also write a comment like this using the slash and star and this kind of this approach. So basically, these are like different types of comments. So if it's, I think I probably use this somewhere here. So over here, I use it here. So if this is just a normal comment I'm writing on the function, I can do this. But if I want to write a documentation comment so that, let's say, if someone is consuming this function, they can see it just like how. Okay. So because we are not, uh, so, yeah, I mean, because we're using the online editor, we cannot see it. But usually, when you bring your cursor to any of this, there'll be a pop-up that will explain what it means to it means, right? Yeah. So I mean, because we're using the online editor, it's not showing up. But yeah, if for documentation comments, I can actually do something like this and say probably, I mean, the the parameter here we have is what's an email, which is a type string. I mean, you decide how you want to write your documentation and what are writing. Yeah. So basically, in that case, when you call this function, this line of code will show up in that same pop-up because it is now a documentation uh, comment. Yeah. Now let's go to import. So this is how to import in that. It's the same way you import in Flutter, right? So you import from the library and the class or the file. So this is from a package. So this is from the that SDK itself. And this is from a package called testing. And you can also import from a file. So let's say I have like 2 files. I want to import from one. This is also import, do the importer. I don't think there's anything for me to show here. Yeah, I think that's it. Um, we have classes. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, we have classes right now. Classes in that is the same classes in any other language. Um, Classes have rules, and one of the rules for a class is the class name has to start with a capital letter, right? You write a class, and it will be it will start with a lowercase, right? Like you do something like this, like no. I mean, this is totally wrong. You don't do this, right? Now, classes can also take arguments or parameters. So you can also have their yeah, sorry. Yeah, so classes have their own constructors where we have the argument that you want to pass in or the parameter that um, you are declaring. So look, using this example, I'm just going to use an example. I'm not sure I'll write in the code. We have a class here, a class called spacecraft. And inside this class, there's a variable called name and then launch date. So this of type string, this is date time. So this is a time and this is a string. Now there's I don't know why this people brought this. So there's this concept in variables we call getters and setters. I'm sure if you've done some Java or Kotlin or C Sharp or even C++, you probably may have heard of this, getters and setters. So getters are read-only way to access a variable. So which is that you're only reading from the variable, but you can't assign a value to it. Setters are a write-only way. So you can only write to that um, variable. By default, when you type in something uh, like this, you're basically using a setter. So you're setting the value, right? That's what you are doing. But for getters is let's say string get underscore name. Then I use the arrow and say name. So which means I cannot use this underscore name anywhere. I think I skipped one thing when I was explaining variables, right? So let me quickly talk about that. Anytime you see a variable or a class, right, or a function with like so usually okay, yeah, a function or a variable with an underscore before its name, it means that that variable is private. Ah, it means that it is private, which means that it can be accessed in any if it's inside the class, you can't access it outside the class. If it is in a file, you can't access it outside that file. So it is limited to that scope. Again, when you see a variable with an underscore before its name, it means that that variable is a private variable. By default, every variable that you declare without this underscore is public. By default, it's public. But when you, as soon as you introduce the underscore, it becomes private. I hope that is clear. So moving forward, so this is basically a way to access um, a read-only property, as you can see. Then we have the constructor, and this is so this what they've done over here, right, is it's something that we usually do. I'm probably sure the Java and the C Sharp people probably recognize this. So we have something like this. Then you probably have something like string name, int age, and somewhere here, and before that you have this. You have like the same thing here. Then over this, you do something like what name or no, this dot name is equal to name, right? Then you do this dot age is equal to age. So you're basically assigning the values and doing all that, right? I mean, you can still do this in that or in Flutter, like perfectly, everything will work. But it's just you writing too too many code, basically. It's just you writing too many code. So in 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 the recent updates in the that SDK, you don't really have to do that. I mean, you can just like call in the what this the variable. So this dot name and this dot age. Then you are done. You move forward. So is this is basically doing all this for you. Yeah, which is this. Then we have this variable, or this variable created somewhere, I doubt. Yeah, but we have this. Yeah, so we have a name constructor. So again, I think uh, I explained this some time ago. So I'm not sure I have to do this again. So over here, as you can see, we have name. So this is a positional parameter, right? So what we are doing here is basically there's a function inside this class called unlaunch, and then we pass in the name, and we are saying that this to get the name, we are basically calling the so I mean we are calling this. So this here refers to this class that we are in. We are passing in whatever name that we are assigning at the first instance, and we don't need launch date. It is null because what it is nullable over here, and because this is a positional parameter, right? You have to pass in like a value here. Otherwise, the code will throw an error. That's why we are passing in now. And then we have a method. So a function in a class is called a method. If you have a function in a class, you call it a method. I hope that is clear. Some of these things are, let's say, technical jargons that you hear a lot of people use, but I mean, this is basically the meaning. So this method is, or this function, all it is doing, it is first printing the name, and then it is assigning the, I mean, it declares a new variable called launch date, and this can be getting the launch date from whatever we've set over here. And it is checked. If it is not now, then it finds the difference between the current time and the date in days to determine the number of years ago it was launched. So if it is now, if launch date is now, then we know that it has been unlaunched, which is this, right? So basically, that is it. There's a whole lot you can do with classes. I mean, classes are like the bedrock of object-oriented programming. So you can read more on classes and research the things you can do with classes, right? So to use this class, so this code, right? To use this, you first need to um, instantiate it by again assigning the name and the launch date, just like what we have over here. This is this is a positional parameter. So again, you have to assign it. That's the thing, right? So it is being assigned over here. And then when you call the function, the method here, which is this describe, I mean, it's basically run the code. If you call and launch and you pass in this, again, so basically run the code. So that's it for this. I mean, there are other things that you can learn on classes like, so now we don't use the new anymore. Yeah, but you can still read on it. Now we usually use const if you know the class is not going to change. There's factory, and then there's other things like getters and setters that I mentioned previously. So you can read more on it. When you go to the left hand side over here, you can see more on classes, even how to extend a class and other stuff, right? So I'm going to pause here and ask if there's any question, any confusion, anything, please ask. Any question? Yeah, I think someone raised their hand. You can type the question in the chat.
Can I ask my question, please?
Yeah, you can ask.
Okay, thank you very much. God bless you for this wonderful teaching. We are really grateful. Please, I had a network issue and I was unable to join early. So at the midpoint, like I'm just still confused, but is there any way I can be helped? Thank you, sir.
All right, so I think the session is being recorded. So I'm pretty sure the organizers will make the recording available to you for you to go over.
Okay, please. Thank you very much. But please, from where do I
All right.
access the recorded session?
Yeah, so I think when it is over, it will be made available to you. So yeah, I'm sure that the organizers will communicate that to you either by email or if you guys have a group chat or something. But I'm very sure they will communicate it to you.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful.
And any other question? All right, so I'm going to assume there's no question. All right, so we'll look at enums. So enums are basically short form for enumerations, right? So enumerations are basically set of values or instances where they cannot, they are like predefined values. Yeah, they are predefined values. So in most cases, right, using this example, what is this? Okay. Let me comment on this thing. All right. So the keyword here is using the enum keyword, and again, it's also start with a capital letter. So I can probably say, let me see, processing state. Then I introduce a curly bracket. So now I need to bring in the states, right? So probably say what? We started uh, processing and completed field. And one thing that I always do is add something called unknown. So unknown is basically, I mean, if whatever happens, especially if you're dealing with a backend or yeah, you're working with a backend, you can add this unknown. Yes, Daco, I can see you raise your hand.
Yes, sir. Please, I want to ask if it's possible to connect Flutter apps with backend with database and a server. And if yes, is it the same code language we use?
Yes. So when you're connecting Flutter with your backend, you're basically writing that code. So it's basically the same code that you are creating Flutter with. It's the same code you are writing to access the backend. So your backend can be in any language once it is serving over HTTPS or HTTP. It should be easily, you should be able to consume it, even if it isn't served over WebSocket or gRPC, you can still consume it easily. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what backend you are using, right? You can easily use your Flutter app to consume that backend. So, yeah. And you write the same code, the same uh, functions, the that functions to access the, the backend. And you can also create backend in the Dart language, not in Flutter, because Flutter is a front-end framework. But you can create a fully fledged backend with the Dart language. There are other frameworks out there that you can look at, like Serverpod. Yeah, you can use this. There's also there are quite a lot. There's Alfred, there's Farrell, there's, I mean, yeah, there are quite a lot. So you can probably just Google search that, like that backend frameworks, and you probably see, yeah, like a very good example of them, right? So yeah, these are some of the frameworks you can use to create a backend using the Dart language. So it's not so the language is not only for Flutter, you can use it for so many things. All right, so to continue,
Okay, thank you very much.
all right, welcome. All right, so we have our enums here. So in order to access this enum, let's say I have a function called, let me call it process payment. Right. So let's say I have this function. So I basically, and I'm taking this as an argument, so I can say this is state, right? So this is a parameter I'm passing, a positional parameter. So somewhere in my code, I can then say if the state is equal to what positional is in dots, So as you can see, the options are now available to me to use. So the values that I wrote over here, they are now available for me to use, right? Then I can do whatever I want. Or you can decide to use a switch statement, right? Which we didn't look at, but I asked you guys to research on it. So you can use the switch statement, and then you can probably say case if what it is this dots and started. I mean, do something over here. So do something, then you break. So break basically means that it should perform the action. When it is done, it should stop. Then you can then bring in another one, case this dot processing. Again, it should do something. Then, so sometimes instead of maybe breaking, you know that maybe this, maybe whatever logic you wrote here can return a value. So you can even do return, like then you return a value, right? So if you return a value, you don't need to call a break because it will still escape, or it will stop the function once it reaches the return statement. So yeah, and as I see now, there's an error here. So this is complaining because it knows that, so this is a again, enums are predefined values, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So by default, since we're using the switch statement, it's expecting us to declare 5 different cases, but we've only declared 2. So basically, that's why it is complaining. So usually it is advised to use switch statements because it makes reading your code much easier or easier to follow. So I can do this. Again, just break. Then I can say case, case. Then again, we have this. So for the last one, since this state is unknown, we can call the default. So which means that if the state coming, it doesn't match in any of this, I mean, it's probably unknown. So we want to do something over here. So whatever, to handle the unknown state. So basically, this is how to use enums, like in its simple form. There's something we also call enhanced enum. Enhanced enum means that now, instead of just having just one value over here, right, you can actually add properties to this value. So we have an enum called planet, and inside this planet, we have what? Mercury. So Mercury as a planet is an enum, but we've given it some properties, as you can see here, right? So we've given some properties. So we are even adding another enum into our enum. So this is called an enhanced enum, as you can see here, right? So if you want to use enum for complex use cases, you can easily do this, right? And then if you want to use any of them, when you type in planet dot mercury, you can do planet dot mercury dot planet type, or planet dot mercury dot moons, or planet dot mercury dot has rings, right? You can actually access all those sub methods or getters as how you access for a normal class or method sample. So this is for enums. I mean, there's more to it, but if you want to know more, hit on the read more button. It will take you to knowing more about enums and how to use them in your code. It's already 9, and I'll prefer starting at 9:10. So on 9, I'll start at 9:05. Then your question and answers can follow. So I think it's like 9:30. So yeah. Inheritance. I'm not sure I want to touch inheritance because it's somehow complex, right? Okay, so but let me just explain to you. So in other languages, right, there's this concept of multiple inheritance. Inheritance is basically a child class um, uh, adopting or inheriting properties of its parent class. This is an example. So this is the child class, and this is its parent class. So it is being extended, right? So the child, the parent, which means that whatever methods that you've declared here, you can use it in the child because it is now inheriting all the properties of its parents, right? In that, right, you can only inherit one class. That is it. But in other languages like Java, there's multiple inheritance. So you can extend multiple classes, right? But in Java, you can only extend one, in that, you can only extend one class. That is it. Because of that, it is very limiting. And to solve this problem, right, they've introduced what we call mixing, which is down here. So mixing is a way to have multiple class inheritance in your code. So how does mixing work? So you first need to declare mixing. So you basically declare it like a class, but instead of using the keyword class as when you use the keyword mixing. Then you write in your code, your normal code, as how you can write for a class. Remember, a mixing cannot have a default constructor. It doesn't work. Constructor, it doesn't work that way. So after having your mixing, then so with this example, you need to use the wait keyword. So this is a keyword. So now we are saying that it should extend spacecraft with piloted, which means that it now has access to all the methods and the variables over here. So inside this class, you can call something like describe crew and it will work. You can also call something like this spacecraft. So let me see if you have it somewhere here. You can call in the describe method, and again it will work. Like it will basically return you a value. So this is the concept of multiple inheritance in that. Now someone will ask, why do I need multiple inheritance? So I will give you an example of something we did in Achieve. Now for the Achieve mobile app, there is this, I mean, you can basically do top-ups, right, and withdrawal. And for the top-up, there are different products. So if you use Achieve, you probably understand what I'm talking about. So we have the DigiSave, we have the Eurobond, and we have the Global Tech, right? So all these features have a top-up function, so you can perform top-ups. Now, these top-ups, they are sort of hitting different API endpoints for them. But the thing is, their implementation is exactly the same, right? So what we did is we have a mixing called top up. What was it? Yeah, I think it's called top up mixing. Yeah, top up mixing. That's the name of the mixing. Now for DigiSafe has its own top up class or top up class. And inside this class, it extends top up mixing. Now, top up mixing basically uh, performs all the top up functionality like after getting the amounts that you provided and selecting the wallet that you want it to take the money from, the one the money from, the function just takes this to information and performs a top up process irrespective of the API, right? So the mixing just takes these parameters and performs a top up. Now, in the DigiSafe top up class, that is where we actually state, let's say, the endpoint it should use. So we just say, okay, let's say endpoint is ABCD. We pass it to the top up function, and then we are done. So we don't have to duplicate our top-up code 3 times for these 3 products. So imagine we have 4 products or 5 products or even 10 products. It doesn't mean that you should basically duplicate your top-up function for all the 10. All you have to do is write it once as a mixing, and then all the places where you need it, you just extend them, and you can use that same logic everywhere. So that is like a classic example of how to use a mixing. So instead of you duplicating code, you can write one code and then just call it as a mixing or as an inherited class, and then you can use its methods and attributes like anywhere in the class that's or the child class that you have created. Right. So basically that is it. It's 9:04. I think it's time for QA. If you have any question, any confusion, anything you want to know, you can ask. It can be related to what we've learned here or Flutter in general. Either of them. Yeah, Hans.
That was some really great presentation. Thank you. So I have a question about Flutter for web development. Can you explain a bit more about Flutter for web development and how these whole basics that you've taught us, is it the same one that we're going to use when one wants to use Flutter for web development? I hope you've understood my question.
Yeah, yeah. So as I was explaining, right? Flutter runs on Android, iOS, and web from a single code base, right? That's the underlying theory. So the same code you're writing for your mobile is the same code that is going to run on the web. Probably maybe you may have to do some little UI changes to, since for mobile is more portrait and the web is more landscape, right? You have to factor all those things in. But at the end of the day, it is this the same code that is being compiled to JavaScript or to WASM and then running on the web. So you're basically writing everything in Flutter. But at the end of the day, when you type in Flutter build web, it will generate CSS HTML and JavaScript file for you, and you can then deploy that file to any hosting platform that you want to use, and yeah, it will be rendered in your browser. Any other question? Wow. Okay. So there's no question. So organizers, I think.
Okay, so
Okay.
since there are no more questions, uh, I think the session will be coming to an end.
Um, I don't know if it is just me, but it seems to be cutting off. Yeah, so Kwesi, there will be more sessions. I think next Saturday will be the next one or the last one. So next Saturday it's pure Flutter. I mean, we've gone through the Dutch language. So next Saturday we are concentrating on Flutter itself. So we'll pick the UI and then we'll be just creating it whilst explaining the process and some tips and things you can do when you are creating your Flutter application.
Okay, so it seems my co-host is having some network challenges. So once again, I'd like to thank you very much for an interesting session today. Bright, we are very much grateful for sharing your knowledge with us, and we look forward to the next session, that's the Flutter 2, where you continue to share more knowledge with us. And okay, Michelle is back. Please
Yes,
continue.
I apologize sincerely for the short, abrupt network issues. As I was saying, since there are no more questions, a very heartfelt thank you to Bright for this insightful knowledge you've shared with us, because I've really learned a lot. Even anybody that does not know anything about coding, I'm sure that today, after today, you would get to know a whole lot about a programming, not even any programming language, that as well. So I'd really like to thank you very much for everything that you've shared with us today. And then we look forward to see you next week for part 2 as well. And I would like to thank everybody that joined to make this session a successful one. And I'd like to thank our organizers as well for organizing such a wonderful program to educate us more on Flutter. But I know that I've made my decision after today that mobile app development is quite awesome and then seeing all the works that you've been able to build with Flutter. It's just amazing. It's so wonderful. You really done well. And then say keep it up. Thank you very much for having us. Okay, so I guess
All
that
right.
will be all for
Thank you
today.
too.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Okay, bye bye.